Radio Okitalk, Radio Okitalk, von Mensch zu Mensch.
Welcome to Team Rabbit Hole Edition 93. God is a DJ with Ian Welch. Welcome.
How's it going, Ian?
It's going well. How are you guys doing?
Can't complain. It's a nice day in Colorado, up in the high country. I'm gonna go ahead and give you the contents point and kind of let you kind of tell us who you are. And I want to give context in terms of how I met you, which is also unique and fun to me. But something we do here on the podcast is describe, well, basically it's episode 93, which is a thelemic number, which is kind of funny. But I take those numbers and I break it down for the major arcana of the tarot. And then Raphael will read a card from his Galactic Heritage deck, which I actually just recently got. They're dope. But this 93 is 12, which is the Hanged Man. Very much Odin on the Tree of Yggdrasil vibes, right? I now surrender, thy will be done. The Hanged Man is about surrendering into the unknown, sacrificing your idea of power, allowing the pause to give you perspective, and attainment of the tiger self and enlightenment are within reach, according to David DeAngelis, the Starman Tarot book, who's also actually been on the podcast. Shout out, David. Anyway, Raphael, tell us really quick what 93 is in your deck.
Really quick. It will just take one moment. So it is number 93, Sirius. You're gonna like this one. Assistance without interference. Future timeline. In the ancient days, Syrians learned a lot of lessons about helping without interfering. Some of these lessons were painful and difficult. Now that the Sirius energy has made its transition, it has integrated those lessons and offers loving assistance without interference. Examine who you wish to help in this life. Find ways to do so from a place of neutrality without interfering. This represents a karmic pattern from ancient days that you are now ready to release. But you first must be mindful of the difference between assistance and interference.
Fascinating. Any resonances or syncs for you on those descriptions, Ian?
Oh, I mean, of course. Well, a little bit about myself is I am a DJ. I lay claim to that first because that was my first passion as far as music goes, and I'm also a 32nd degree Freemason here in Washington State, and I'm involved with the Grand Lodge of Washington and a past master of my ceremonial Blue Lodge. So Sirius, the dog star, has some connotations in Freemasonry. It's the blazing star, which is pretty intricately woven into the fabric of the craft as a guiding light towards higher consciousness.
Right. Sirius, we were just discussing in the last episode, is the kind of spiritual sun, if one wants to put it that way, in the binary kind of situation we have with our sun. I'm pretty sure the Dogon people have some situation with understanding Sirius and its patterning with us. Thanks, ancient aliens, or whatever I learned that from. But it's funny because what you kind of said there made me think of, I don't know if you've seen Steven Spielberg's AI. I've seen it on mushrooms back in high school, which is kind of trippy. But he has this film with AI where there's basically this blue light fairy that Haley Joel Osment's AI kind of character, it's Pinocchio 2.0 basically, but it's like the fairy of the blue light. And it's kind of that energy where it's like this kind of transcendental feminine thing. And in the last episode, we just had our friend Liam was saying that it's related to ISIS at some level. There's a lot of levels to these things. We're going to go down these rabbit holes most dolphinately. And speaking of dolphins, nice little intro track there. It sounded like, I don't even know, Echo the Dolphin from Sega on acid or something. But I will just say how I'm aware of you, Ian, aka DJ Bodhicypha. I love the name, by the way. Long story short, last year I have a friend, he reached out to me randomly. There's no such thing as random. I guess this was just a sync or whatever. He hit me up. He had heard on one of my live kind of tarot jams or whatever I do on Facebook, that I'd never been to a festival somehow. My brother's a drummer and he's been in many festivals. Sonic Bloom and stuff like that. And I'm a guitarist. I've played a lot of things, but I just never been to a festival somehow. And basically, this kid was like, he goes by Neon Felicity on Facebook. Shout out Neon. Basically, maybe that's his legal name now. I don't even know. But the point is, he hit me up and was like, "Yo, you haven't been to a festival. I'm going to be volunteering with this chick at basically an Orcas Island festival, Imagine Festival. Do you want to come volunteer with me? Like, you can do this and get in for free or whatever." And I was like, "Hell yeah!" That was last September. That's actually where I met you. I volunteered for a few days. I was doing stuff, kind of sweeping up during programs or whatever, kind of doing a gopher kind of stuff. I ran into you in a tent. You were kind of helping do sound and stuff. And then later that night, I ate a gel tab, and I went, and you were the silent disco DJ, and I had such a fucking blast.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah, dude, that was one of my favorite things ever, straight up. So thank you very much for that. Very surreal to be on acid with a silent disco. You take off, the headphones, and everyone's kind of just like, making noises, and it's just it was very surreal.
For sure, yeah. And I try to create an atmosphere whenever I DJ as well. I mean, I pick my songs for their sonic resonance and try to weave a tapestry, if you will, or an environment that gets people in, up and down cyclical moods and happy, sad, and powerful. And, so I'm glad that you could experience that for sure.
Well, it was a beautiful festival as far as the first kind of cherry popping of a festival. I shout out to, Imagine Festival, Orcas Island, all y'all. And like I said, I was volunteering.
Shout out to Darren for sure.
Yeah, Darren, exactly. I haven't met him, but saw him at the festival. He's a cool guy. But the point is, at one point I was like helping you load speakers or something, and I noticed on your truck a bunch of Masonic G's and stickers and stuff, and I was like, oh shit, this guy's a Freemason, which obviously has a lot of cultural baggage to it, but it doesn't really scare me. And I kind of tucked it away in my brain, and months went by, right? Like, I didn't talk to you. I kind of went back, doing all sorts of shit, came back to Colorado, and at some point, I figured out I had to go through the official lineup and website, and I was doing all this sleuthing, and I figured out who you were, Bodhicypha. I sent you a message, and I was like, bro, come on the podcast. I have some questions. I think if you're a Freemason, whatever. And you're like, yeah, let's talk, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of our context. We didn't really hang out much. I watched you. We did to the degree that, I shook your hand. We talked, loaded some gear, but it's not like we were kicking it, smoking doobies or anything. Watched you
Which
do
would
a
have been
dope
cool
set.
too.
Oh, next time for sure. I don't smoke right now, really, but next time for sure. In any event, your set was sick as fuck. It was really, honestly, an important kind of moment for me, just because I was definitely aware of your kind of building and manipulating time space in a very kind of intentional way, we'll put it. So you're really an engineer on that front. It felt like sonic engineer.
For sure, and that's purposeful.
Intention is name of the game. So anyway, I just want people to be aware of how we're not buddies, but like I've hung out with you a little, and then I've reached out to you eventually, and we've been kind of kicking the can. I was in Australia, and then you've been busy with doing stuff for COVID stuff, you were saying, and you had a company doing something with that. So we've just been busy, and we got you in here, locked in. I'm super stoked to have you here.
I am deeply honored, and everything you said honors me, and I appreciate that. And likewise, you seem like a really cool person. And I've listened to a few of these podcasts, and you talk about some very heady stuff and philosophize, and that's what I've done always. Every day pretty much is like a weird existential crisis for me, not in some, oh, woe is me sense, but in the sense that I just keep realizing just these minor truths of the microcosm and macrocosm of everything, and it's tripping me out all the time. It doesn't blow my mind anymore, but it's definitely knocking on that third eye door, all the time. So I'm just constantly seeking answers and digging things up and trying to apply them if they're philosophies. But I'm also raising two kids too, and that's got its own challenges. So I have one foot in the mundane, if you want to call it that, the lay term, householder, and that's the Buddhists would have called it. And I have one foot firmly planted in the clouds of esotericism and deep mysticism and Freemasonry as well.
Props. And I'm at a point, I don't want kids. Props on you for perpetuating the human species. I'm not going to be part of that game. So I'm appreciative of that kind of dualistic nature. I'm a double Gemini. 11th house, sun and moon double Gemini. I don't know your chart, actually. I just realized I should have probably asked for it. Do you know much about astrology? That's a
I
kind
know a
of a
little
dumb
bit. I
question.
mean, I have a ton of friends who are astrologers. I mean, anybody from Kurt Bauman, who's in The Burned, and with Katie Gray, he does Sea Stars as well, and he's a bit of an astrologer. And Gemini Brett is a friend of mine, and
He's
we've
been on
talked
here
and
a few
had.
times. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I heard the show, and so I've sat and done some rapping with him over a table about how all these things, with coincide together. So I am Aries. I'm an Aries in my sun house, and my moon is in Cancer, and my ascending star is in Cancer as well. So I'm pretty sensitive to energy and how things feel below the surface of how and life in general.
That doesn't surprise me because you do have this kind of tenacity and kind of like leadership quality about it. Like I could tell you were kind of like, I'm doing my thing, I'm doing it for me. But at the same time, there's this kind of familial nurturance. Doesn't surprise me you're going to have kind of a home life, let's put it that way. So makes sense, definitely. Do me a favor. The conch is yours. I kind of want it as brief as long as you want to go into it. Like, where are you coming from? Who are you? How did you get to where you are?
For sure, we could do the etymology. That's origin story. I didn't know much about Freemasonry until I sort of turned my sights onto it back in 2012. I had just actually it was about 2009 when I met my current partner. Her name's Asifa, and she's one of the main stage designer for Imagine Festival on Orcus, and a brilliant lady and very talented.
Props for her
And
design. That was amazing.
oh yeah, she does the white fabric, and her and the main group of builders, which I guess includes myself now since I do the dome. But anyway, when I met her in '09, we were walking through the streets of Fremont, Seattle, and I noticed there were some symbols on the ground, and I was like, "Hey, wait a second!" And they pointed in a very esoteric way. I mean, it would look like it was pointing, but I realized it was pointing to another symbol, and then so I followed this map point of symbols, and we ended up at a Masonic lodge. And I walked up the stairs, and then was met by a group of guys who were in suits, and another guy who had a giant sword. He was the Tyler, and I. Just asked them what they were doing, and they explained what they were, and I was like, okay, cool, and we left. And then fast forward to 2012, and I went down a pun intended rabbit hole on YouTube, and it was just this insane rabbit hole of the elite, power hungry elite Freemasons are running the world, and they're all satanic. And so I went down that, just oh my God, I tripped myself out, and I was like, well, wait a second, my grandpa, my dad's dad, was a Shriner, a 32nd degree, a past master of a lodge. I was like, he would not be involved in some weird satanic shit. I'm sorry, he just wouldn't. So I had to petition my own lodge in the San Juan Islands here to figure it out for myself. And I wanted to go down there. And I told my wife one night, I was like, look, if I ever come back home and I'm scared as shit, and I'm like talking about some deep, dark, weird Satanist stuff, we need to get the F out of here, is what I said to her. And that moment has never arisen, never come to fruition. I've only ever seen some of the best people I've ever met in my life in a Freemasons lodge, and only a few of the hundreds and hundreds of guys that I've met are true mystics and seekers of knowledge and Gnostics. And myself, I will humbly, as humble as possible, include myself in the seeker category of someone who's not satisfied with, what's given on the surface. And um, some of the rites and mysteries of Freemasonry in general, like the first 3 degrees, are very emblematic, and I knew there was more to it. So I just climbed that mystic ladder all the way, got my Master Mason, and then I became an officer of the lodge, and I spent basically 5 years every meeting, going to every single meeting, learning and memorizing everything for all the rituals so I could initiate people. And then I became master of my lodge, my Blue Lodge in Masonry, in I think 2017 was my year. So it was pretty good. I had to be voted by secret ballot. So the guys there wanted me to be the master, and there was some apprehension, and who am I to think I'm an example for anybody? That's not where I come from. I'm not. You mentioned leadership qualities in me. While I'm deeply honored by that, I don't always see that part in myself. I've always just called it a stubborn nature where I just plow forward, and you're coming with me or not, but I'm going this way, and this is the trail I'm blazing. And so I've been a little bit more sensitive to it in my days now. But that was my Freemasonry in a nutshell. I mean, I think there's some deeper stuff, some omnism happening, where we pull from a lot of different religious and philosophical ideals, from Pythagorean mathematics to, harmony of the spheres and straight up Osirian and death rituals that get included in there, and that probably goes over the heads of quite a few of the new initiates, where they don't really understand what they're seeing or hearing. And I think that's an important part of the mystery, keeping that mystery alive. Is people that are new to Masonry are almost purposely misled to keep you guessing, or you could stop short and not guess at all. And that's the dividing point. Is you can see the guys who are just happy the fact that they're Master Masons and they go to a lodge where they can go and have a few drinks with their bros. And then there's guys like me who create 30 to 40 page slideshows and try to get my brothers to understand that this shit is deep, and it goes deeper and older, and probably was not necessarily called Freemasonry back in the day. It might very well have been called the Illuminati. And, and there was times when symbols kept a lot of our bros from being persecuted, all the way up into Nazi Germany. And so you have the little tiny blue flower pendant that you'll see a lot of Freemasons wear. That was that little blue flower was sort of the secret symbol of being a Freemason for those guys, and share that knowledge. And so it comes luckily now with the media and everything, where half the secrets are already out. And the real honorable thing about being a Mason is, even though Google pretty much, you could find anything on Google, can you keep the secrets yourself that have been explained to you, and pass down that knowledge? And that's where the true sign of a Freemason is.
Word. Gnosis is one hell of a drug. Raphael, I thought you wanted to say something.
I would have just a few brief questions. Some of them you touched upon. First thing, I assume you're familiar with Gmail. That's totally a Masonic apron, is it not?
Oh, without a doubt. And it's, oh my God, I've found a few symbols where my other Masonic brother,
A
who's
few?
also, oh yeah, we keep finding them in ads and things like that.
Oh, you
And
too?
oh yeah, and I think there's for sure probably Freemasons that are in higher up positions in society, and they're just sort of in a half joking way, or maybe a prideful way, or maybe a truly subliminal way, putting the messages out there, putting the symbols out there, just to see if they can wake people up, since we can't
Hustling
recruit.
breadcrumbs kind of thing.
Kind of. I can't recruit anybody. I can say to like a very good friend of mine, which I've only done it like 2 or 3 times, hey, you might actually like what we do in this lodge, if you want to come to a meeting. But that's about the scope of how much I can extend an offer to somebody. We're pretty strict about that. It has to be of your own free will that you come to a lodge, not just because your bro wants you to. You certainly
No
aren't going to make
coercion.
any extra money. I haven't become rich from being it, and I'm a 32nd degree, and I'm what does that mean other than it's really how far each brother wants to push themselves in Masonry. So I'm not satisfied being at the lower rung and being kept in the dark, so I'm going to keep trying to knock on those doors and figure out what it's all about.
Yeah, I mean, by 32nd degree, one may say that, or assume you should be on the payroll by now if you're master of a lodge. Of course, I'm quite familiar with, potentially with all larger organizations. You have quite a few different aspects. Of course, the other thing I was going to get at, which you kind of already touched upon, at least from your personal history, is the whole idea of, let's call it the infiltration of Freemasonry. Or let's just put it in a, yogic sense, as we like to do around here in terms of Kali Yuga, the fall of consciousness. So all kind of structures will ossify and, create this negative polarity as well, just because it is the time as well. So I'm not one to say this or that group as a blanket statement is to blame for anything. So to me, it's quite obvious there's many different layers. However, still, I'd of course be interested in your personal view in terms of infiltration or in terms of power being misused, potentially not in the lodges you're familiar with, but as far as I can get it, if it's done that way, then usually there is like several layers of compartmentalization and pyramid structure. And of course, you will not get, let's say, quote unquote, get infiltrated into the, let's say, just for sake of argument, satanic back lodge, if you're not a real good psychopath already, you're not gonna, get invited there if it exists, right?
Totally.
Just to
I
briefly
think
point it out, just very briefly, and this is maybe the delineation for me, and maybe where I'd be interested in your view. You already mentioned you like to share information. For me, I really like this kind of division or discrimination that Dark Journalist puts forth with the idea of X-share and X-protect. And Steiner would be, for example, more part of X-share, and some other groups that maybe more try to sequester information. We've just been talking about the Jesuits on the past show. They may be a candidate, or at least certain aspects of them may be a candidate. They would be more part of so-called X-protect. And I find that at the end of the day, whilst one must also be really careful about sharing information, just like you put it, and about inviting, because many things, especially this type of knowledge, is not for everyone. However, I would say there is a basic discrimination for oneself if one is more interested in amassing and keeping information in order to confuse others or keep others in the quote-unquote dark and only oneself be illuminated, or whether one is interested in sharing that light, so to speak.
For sure. I appreciate that. Well, where to begin, really? I think there's two circles of Freemasonry, as I've heard it called before. And some brief history real quick of myself is, again, my father's father was a Freemason and a Shriner, and my father was not, because he doesn't believe in all that hooey, is what he told me. And I picked up the baton from my grandpa and kept the craft going in my family. And I married into a family where my father-in-law is a former Knights Templar as well. So he's an interesting character. But I think there's some infiltration. I guess America was built on the foundations of a Masonic lodge. The government is run like one. And you see, I mean, if Jim and I, Brett, you go and check out his YouTube video about how Washington, D.C. is laid out. Him and I have talked about this. There was no accident there. And the fact that I think that there are two circles in Freemasonry, the one that I belong in, which is all the way up to 33 degrees, and on both sides, York and Scottish Rite, where the York Rite has Templars and the Scottish Rite has the 32nd degree, Masters of the Royal Secret. It encompasses all those groups, and the first circle is the outer one, which I belong in, and we're like the PR people. We don't have anything bad to say about Freemasonry because we've never witnessed anything bad about Freemasonry. We've witnessed some bad eggs or bad people inside the craft, but that doesn't denote that the entire craft itself is sullied by those people. And then we have another circle of Freemasonry, which is that inner power elite of 1%ers that are also Freemasons, technically bros of mine if I ever met them, but I would never be able to even touch the lower rungs of their echelons, and that small coterie of Freemasonry inhabitants might be the guys and girls on some levels that run shit and are running it into the ground,
like
and giving us
Bilderberger
bad
shit, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, come on,
actually...
if you don't think that stuff is happening, then you're ignorant. Not you guys, but people in general who don't consider that there are active groups out there that understand their connections with each other and their network, and then they use that for their own selfish gain. So that's sort of it's just a reality.
That's life.
And I try to work against that, maybe with my own energies, and I have, the Buddha's tattooed on my left forearm, and sort of a reminder constantly to be present and mindful, and the fact that we are kind of living in a living simulation in a way where we're bioorganic computers, and so in a sense we're vibration and energy and batteries, if you will. And so the law of attraction and manifestation is very real. And so a lot of what I take from Masonry is building my own inner King Solomon's temple to purify myself and transmute base thoughts of, that serpent spinal column brain to higher consciousness that, I've seen glimpses of on LSD or something in previous days. And, always trying to make it back to that space where we see our inner light.
I appreciate that you also have your DJ name being Bodhicypha kind of play on words there.
For sure, because I think we all have a kernel of Bodhisattva in us and the microcosm of Bodhisattva energy inside of us. And we're so sullied up and dirtied up by reality and things that are thrown and things that are purposely programmed into us to dissuade us from even reaching these types of conversations. And so it's very much a code, a cipher, a code that you have to break within yourself to become the Bodhisattva. So that's sort of why I'm a writer. So I like twists and turns and plot twists and distracting euphemisms, if you will. And a lot of allegorical teaching in Masonry is very much you're taught one thing, but it actually has nothing to do with what you think it does. And we know that we're doing that. We're purposely misleading some candidates to keep them guessing. So it's not all revealed in the very beginning, and you're bored.
Well, in a weird way, it's like the Tao that can be named isn't the Tao. I think in some way there's a lot of levels, in my opinion, as to what's going on with Freemasonry. Like you were saying, George Washington, the Founding Fathers, but specifically Washington, was inaugurated in full Freemasonic gear. Like, there's no mystery
Oh,
here.
dude, yeah. In our lodge, we have a picture of him doing that master's symbol. And so, it's this country was, they're like, how can we create a free country but model it off of a government that actually works to justify their means? And at the time it was the lodge, the Freemasonic Lodge. And there are some stories in lodges of during the Revolutionary War, the British come rolling through a town, and the guys of the Masonic Lodge have put 2 guards at their doors because they don't want the British to destroy their lodge. But instead, the Brits, while marching through, installed one of their guards or 2 of their guards alongside the American ones and further protected the lodge as sort of a neutral zone. And while that may be great for Freemasons to think about the solidarity among brethren at the time, how heinous that was with the British here and what they were doing. So that kind of solidarity is only cute for a second when you consider the atrocities that happened.
Well, in a weird way, it's like a transcendental fraternity, obviously, where I think Raphael maybe was talking about this in another episode, but the idea being, or maybe it was Corey Kaplan, I was talking to him about it, where it's like it seems to be that how does one, because I look at in a tarot sense as, how would I put this? The Emperor card being the Masonic kind of card, where it's like, how do we measure and weigh and discreetly organize something as wild as the universe? Because it's this like open source, like feminine thing. And it's not to subdue it past a point. I think it's to work with it ultimately, hopefully. But the idea is there's better and worse ways to do that. And for a long time, it was like Genghis Khan and, I'm going to, meat's back on the menu, boys, and kind of this kind of horde mentality and like almost a Nietzschean will to supremacy through violence and stuff. And it was a very dark place to be on Earth for a long period of time. Like if you didn't know the people around your campfire, you'd kill them or whatever, or you'd think you could be killed. So
the end of the Kali Yuga in a way.
Exactly. It seems cyclic, but in some weird way, I think of it, at least in terms of a positive spin from a neutral perspective, because I'm not a Mason. I'm interested in it to a degree, but I feel like thanks to Randall Carlson's Joe Rogan kind of appearances, I think he kind of gave away some of the mystery because he was like, not all of it, but we're doing as above, so below, as within, so without kind of pageantry in some weird way, like astrological. That's
a good description, actually. That's pretty accurate if you want to think about that. The reality is, and not to betray my bros, because I don't know how a lot of the ritual is done in every single lodge. As far as, so the jurisdiction goes like this. Every state has a Grand Lodge in America, and that Grand Lodge establishes the rules for all its subservient lodges in each city to follow, and it's their canonical rules where they can't be changed except by voting, and the voting has to be taken place by up to 200 plus people at the Grand Lodge, which I do every year, and it's an intense voting process, and we use nowadays we use this, electronic voting cards, which makes it easier. But I've seen votes that are really good ones get tabled for years. But the most recent vote that I did appreciate, for good reason, for my own personal desire, was the fact that we could change the usage of the word Holy Bible in a lodge to the volume of sacred law. And if that's the case, the volume of sacred law can incorporate Judaism, Mithraism. If you wanted to be a follower of Mithra or whatever, it doesn't matter, or any doctrines other than just having it be specifically about the Holy Bible, because I'm not a Christian. And part of the reason I'm not a Knights Templar is because I'm not necessarily ready to pick up the sword, quote unquote, for the Christian faith. I don't know. I have my own things about it. I'm a spiritual person, and I don't want anybody proselytizing what they think my God or my goddess should look like. And so I don't assume to ever do the same to anybody else. I just can't stand that type of dogmatic shoving it down people's
How
throats.
Aries of you.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm
It's
sort of
good
a
though.
rebel
I'm
in
not
that sense, so I
So
just
okay.
don't. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, no, you're cool, dude. I want to hear you talk. I'm sure Raphael has questions. Just to sum up kind of my thinking, if there was a way to sum it up, it seems like, hmm, just like in the Bible, you had an era where it was like crazy, and then they installed judges, right? And like it's like, how do we create order in the chaos of the reality? There is an order ultimately to the chaos, so it's kind of this weird both and toroidal weirdness. But at the same time, like we don't want people just raping and pillaging and doing crazy shit. How can we instill some order to this? I've found that, like you were saying, it seems the models at the time were very helpful with like a democratic kind of lean votes and all this stuff, and hierarchy. It doesn't surprise me that these are the kind of reasons that Atlantis 2.0 or America or whatever, however one wants to look at it, has these as origins. And I don't think it makes it nefarious particularly, but I think in a weird way there's some level, how would I even put it? Um, like you tell kids not to cross the street, and you tell them look both ways and all this stuff. At some point you're going to know that yourself, but you have to be taught certain things. It seems like there's a level of that to civility and civilization, and that was a presupposition. Maybe this has to do with you guys again, like we've forgotten what we already knew or something. But we've found ourselves in a time when it was very violent, chaotic, and probably more frightening than we really think of even in terms now. Like it's not fun to watch planes smash buildings or quote unquote, or COVID and all this kind of stuff. But like the existential climate at one point was much more ratchet. Life expectancy was much lower, largely probably due to just stress and stuff. So in a weird way, sometimes there needs to be an emperor card that doesn't, or and a hierophant card. It doesn't necessarily negate the high priestess or the empress card, the feminine. I don't, but that's kind of how I've looked at Freemasonry, where it's like an attempt at some level, kind of like the architect in the Matrix movies, where it's like I'm making this a design, I'm implementing it through logic and reason, and it's kind of colder, but it's going to work. Whereas intuition and feminism is maybe more what you kind of allude to being your personal kind of flavor, like more paganistic nature stuffs. And there's a place for that. There's a place for both. But at least when you're building a new reality, on the Indian burial grounds or whatever the fuck we did here, it seemed like we had to kind of take a light in the darkness of the unknown to ourselves with a sword, to kind of clear the jungle overgrowth or whatever, and create kind of a safe zone, if that makes any sense.
Did we though? I mean, if I could be the devil's advocate here, it's just, I am a Caucasian person, I'm a white person, and I have a direct bloodline to Thomas Jefferson. It's in my ancestry.com, in my tree. It's right down my father's line. He was my great 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 grandfather, and I just, all the murder and the blood that we're build our houses on top of, it's just so ridiculous to me. But that this again falls in line with my daily existential crisis about being awake and what that means and how sensitive that makes you, or makes somebody who feels awake, in a way. And I don't know if all that bloodshed was necessary and that repositioning of people and uprooting of things, but we're here now, so we might as well dig it up and look at it and mold and model something new out of this reality. Hopefully, something that takes feminine and divine into conjunction and not one or the other, because either extreme is not going to be the right way. And so, I
Totally
mean,
concur,
yeah,
for the record. Like, we're not
we
living
have
in an
a
ideal
capitalist
situation.
society. No, I
Yeah,
mean, capitalism doesn't make, it's not, you're not going to be in tune with nature when you're being capitalistic, because it's selfish at that point. So I don't know. I think if people want to go to the Rocky Mountain Mystery School or Freemasonry or the Ordo Templi Orientis, wherever they want to go to find their answers, Kabbalah included, they should, and they should do that to wake themselves up from being another of the mass of ignorant people that's guiding this beautiful conscious being that we're able to be blessed to live on, and commune with. We're driving her sort of down. But I'm not too worried. I think the Earth has backup plans, and she can shake us all off if she wants to, like fleas on a dog. So, and a lot of ways we kind of are a plague on this place. So I think any earnest attempt to find light in this day and age, that inner light, that as above, so below, should be praised. And as long as it takes you to a place where it doesn't hurt anybody else and it doesn't interfere with their own well-being and their spirit and their calling, then good to go. That's my opinion on it.
exactement. I'm a very libertarian. I totally hear you. And there, like, it's kind of everything. I heard, I don't know who the Baba, somebody from India was saying this at one point, but basically it's like the gnosis and epiphanies of the West have been, it's our karma to do this. I mean, I don't know where your presuppositions lie. Raphael might want
I've
to talk
heard
about
that
this.
too. I've actually heard that as well from a Christian devotee friend of mine back in the day. He said it was negative karma to be born in the West, but I actually think not so negatively about it. I think that along the lines of we have soul groups and soul consciousnesses, and so the people in our tribe that we meet at festivals or wherever you meet, that you instantly know your friends and homies or spirit bros or spirit sisters, star people that are here to free up that karmic energy from lifetimes of knowing each other and going through the same crap again. This is maybe Earth 6.0, and we just get our memory wiped every time. I mean, as I do more and more research into like the depths of fractals and the holographic reality possibility, I just think that there is no reason or no way that this isn't a divinely created simulation that we're taking part in, and we sort of jump in, like I heard you talking in the last radio show before we got on today about the life of Roy in Rick and Morty. When I saw that, I was like, oh, smack my forehead, because this is exactly what we are living in, kind of.
Wasted your 30s watching birds? Kind of thing. Yeah. He's off the
yes.
grid. He's gone off the grid.
Totally.
No, go ahead, Raphael.
Yeah, so of course I totally lost my train of thought. Just I wanted to pick up exactly where I left it, but just keep going. I'll remind myself in a second.
Well, kind of what we were talking about is like the kind of conundrum, because it's a paradox where it's like we're being birthed through tension and division and stuff, and it's like when I said like America's this great thing, I'm not such a patriot and a nationalist or anything like that I think there hasn't been. It's been rough. It's been at the expense of
All right,
entire nations. Go ahead.
So, Ian, you were talking about, this, how you say, daily existential crisis or something, to maybe
Yes.
accelerate that even one step further. My still current, one of my favorite research topics is Tartaria, which you may have heard me mention on some other podcast around here as well, which also includes the idea of mud flood, of reset civilization, something like a, let's say, more recent Atlantis potentially, and in regards also potentially again to Freemasonry, or what is called Freemasonry, because thanks again for your explanation, and of course it's perfectly clear, just like in pretty much almost any organization, even if one may say ideologically some organizations really have big issues, but usually still most of the people being there really try their best, do their best, and are even positive. There's usually always just very few that are the real issue, and then I guess just they gravitate towards organization which, for example, with Freemasonry, may have a degree of secrecy already inbuilt, so that may just be a preferred recruitment or infiltration target, basically. So, but that aside, yeah, just to mention Tartaria, and also including the idea that potentially many of the so-called Gilded Age mansions, and I call them imperial, like the old style huge buildings. Today's there are like post offices and justice buildings and all the nice stuff, basically. And
Very
also, if you look,
neoclassical.
and also, if you look historically, there have been like huge so-called hotels then, and all kinds of strange structures. I'm not even getting into the World Exposition now, where supposedly they built up like a huge
Oh yeah,
area and then tore it all down, supposedly for
the
fun
Denver
or
airport.
whatever. Yeah, like really strange things, but anyhow, also including the kind of funny pun. And again, not to drag down the whole thing, but just as a explicit case, the idea of Freemasonry, and then the idea that potentially some of these buildings already were there when America officially got colonized, and that this was also part of the haha Freemason, that it was just Freemasonry already being there, because especially during that
Oh, that's
time,
hilarious.
you have
Yeah.
actually very, very few people, usually even in Austria, like usually very few architects or something, who are credited with basically building everything in record time. And that's just something that's a bit strange to me.
It's physically impossible if you think about it. But I think at this point, what bums me out is so many cultures spent massive resources to burn books and to erase and smudge out historical truths. And so I think why people made things like hieroglyphics and stuff and hid them in dark caves and places where they would be found in the future is because there was something so important that they wanted to tell the future generations, and they knew that scrolls and papyri and paper wasn't just going to last long enough, and oral traditions disappear after a couple hundred years, and so yeah, it's once again another generation looking for symbols, and maybe our digital emojis are going to stand out as the hieroglyphics of our future, but we'll never know. But I think there has been nefarious plots. I have definitely heard that a lot of these Romanized and Doric and Ionic buildings were here in America, maybe from ancient earlier cultures that came and communed with the natives, or the natives came after. There's a lot there
Well,
to
the question, of
unpack.
course, here would be very bluntly put, quote unquote, what, if anything, would the brothers, quote unquote, have to say about that, if there is anything even in correspondence to that information?
Yeah, I think I think each lodge and each Grand Lodge, and I think each brother is so compartmentalized with how they feel about it that and one thing is true is that we don't allow religion or politics to interfere in our lodge. So the second a bro starts talking about his religious values or his political affiliations, I'm going to stop listening at that point. I don't, it may not agree with me. And there was one situation where a brother wanted the lodge to raise money to send his son to Israel on a religious pilgrimage. And there were a couple of people were like, yeah, that's a great idea. And then the rest of us were like, no, that's not what we stand for. If one person has that done for them, then everybody has that done for them, and the rules that are supposed to keep a lodge undivided are broken. So I think that plays into some of the compartmentalization that happens. So it's really hard to get a thumb on how people across the country, especially affiliated with Masonry, feel in this spiritual and esoteric sense. I'm just saying, guys, when I was master of the lodge, I had an opportunity every time that I did a lodge meeting to have a few, like maybe 10 or 15 minutes of an education. So I called the lodge down. I made everybody, like get up and go out into the ante room to where we had a projector, and I literally put on slides about what each of our symbols has in their deepest meanings and what this meant. Like John the Baptist and John the Evangelist, the two patron saints of Masonry, had to do with the constellations of Capricorn and Cancer, and the whole legend of Hiram Abiff is taken from similar Osiris death rites, correlating with the sun passing through the 12 signs of the zodiac, and the three ruffians being Capricorn, Aquarian, Pisces, things like that, and how the Pisces vesica was a symbol hidden inside the very square and compass, which is supposed to be a masculine trait. It has to do with the divine feminine. And so when I told my bros this, and a lot of them, over me being the youngest at the time, so I was like 30 in my mid 30s, so 2017, I was like 33. And it was a very auspicious number for me to be. Yeah, I was 32 when I got my 32nd degree. I found all sorts of numerological highlights in there. But the point is, to fall back on what I was saying, is that I thought I would open some guys' eyes, some bros' eyes to what I was seeing. And at the end, one of my brothers was like, "So, all right, brother Ian, what are we supposed to do with this information?" And I was like, "Well, I don't
Process
know.
what?
I was like, I'm just here showing you what I found, guys. This is what you should be looking for. And is it so easy for you, in a sense, to paraphrase, to accept what's just shown to you? And that's it. You're not going to dig further and dig deeper. I mean, the second I was done with the Blue Lodge, which you're never really done with anyway, because once a Master Mason, always a Master Mason. I joined the Scottish Rite in Bellingham. There's a valley there. They call the lodges their valleys, and they call the state Grand Lodges Orients. And so I was at the valley, and one of the first symbols, and I'm not betraying any secrets by telling you guys this, I'm being mindful of that, but one of the first symbols I saw in the Scottish Rite Lodge was the Tree of Life, the Sephiroth. And so I was like, okay, I did it. I'm here. I know these guys are onto something good. And then the next 28 degrees that unfolded were definitely succinct and on point with what we're talking about as far as teachings in omnism and pulling from every different religion, and the symbols that were sacred across multiple cultures are still found in Freemasonry, and the pillars of Freemasonry are woven into the Tree of the Sephiroth. And one brother and I are even going so far as to diagnose each officer's position in the lodge when they do the little back and forth, sort of like a tennis match, what that means involved with the Sephiroth, as especially Da'ath, the hidden orb. And so the patron Saints John and the two pillars denoted B and J in each lodge have to do with strength and wisdom, are also emblematic of the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. And so bringing
Severity,
this to
mercy, yeah.
Yeah, and I tried to tell these bros this, and a lot of them just don't want to go there. And I don't know if it's cognitive dissonance or bias, but
Well, for
you
those of
can't.
us to see, you know what I mean? Some people just
Yeah,
aren't going to see it.
exactly. And that's inside the craft. So there's more mystery in the craft that a lot of the brothers won't ever delve into. And there's a few of us that are sitting there with our eyes open and our ears open, and we hear and we see, and we're waiting for the rest to catch up.
Well, that's kind of how it is. I'm totally on that wave. I don't know. I think there's some term called like a Mason at sight or something, like somebody who's not initiated, particularly in the lodge or whatever, but like you kind of woke and kind of get it kind of thing. I feel like on that wave. Like I've been getting initiated multiple levels through, when I did DMT back in 2011, long story short, I found myself in a fucking temple talking to fucking Anubis and Isis and having Kundalini activations and all sorts of crazy shit. I don't know if that's for everybody.
Jim, you can't just skip 33 degrees.
I think you can. Some monkeys can, maybe, and that doesn't make monkeys better or worse. I'm not really getting into that point, but I think let's put it this way. I think people who are true seekers, what you seek is seeking you. You've said that before, Raphael, right? I think that's a Rumi quote.
Indeed.
That's where I'm at with it. I'm a double Gemini. I'm a student of life, and I think one has to respect mystery with a capital M, because I think there's some behind the veil things that might not be able to even be actualized or understood in a human conceptual form.
Exactly. Yeah.
Deep mysteries, like what is a black
humans
hole?
are always trying to. Yeah, humans are always trying to internalize something and find patterns and things and find meanings. And we have to know who God or Goddess is. We have to know the math behind fractals and why they're so important in sacred geometry. And I just think that we don't necessarily have to, but we want to, and maybe that will get us closer to the divine. But I subscribe to Buddhism and a type of spirituality where that closely resembles pantheism and omnism and all the isms with the Gnosticism thrown in there, and especially the Kabbalah. Give me it all if it sort of speaks to my energetic body and it's something that I familiarize myself with. But it's so hard to say what's right. You know what I mean? And we're still in such a divisive time that I just keep my mouth shut now. I want to wake people up and shake people by their shoulders and like turn them towards trees and how plants scream when you think about cutting their branches and animals are aware of us and are it goes so deep and there's a lot of people who just want to stay asleep and
They just want
not
to
my
drink Budweiser
family.
and watch football, all that jazz. I
Yeah,
got you.
not my kids, not my wife. We're all
Well, in
on
a
that
weird
level.
way, the whole this gets tricky because this gets into other models altogether. And what you're talking about in terms of syncretism, like grabbing with the best of from like dream movers are not biblical, but they're awesome, or
Yes.
whatever, like that kind of shit. It's basically, I honestly think there's this gets into the Hopi prophecies, the Rainbow Warrior, and all sorts of stuff like that. But I think in some weird way, because what is a Rainbow Warrior? It's like colors of the whole thing, like light body activation stuff, Bodhisattva stuff. I think there's a crew, and dare I say, I mean, I don't know your chart, but I'm a Pluto and Scorpio generation. That's Pluto and Scorpio is like death of, it's the transformation. I think I mean, this is an apocalypse, whatever we're part of for the past minute. And it got really rampant during the military industrial complex takeover after World War II, which is kind of a tricky time that Eisenhower's like, yo, watch out for these fucking creepy dudes who do not
Yeah,
give a fuck.
because they'll create their own revenue. They can create their own revenue for war. They don't need to drum the drums of war anywhere to Congress and have the people, predominantly decide if we go to war or not. The MIC pretty much grants the government the ability to just wage war anytime they want.
Right. And here's the tricky part for me. Okay, so what I was kind of saying is like I think that dare I say we've all chosen to be here right now and we're kind of all getting tapped and like waking up, and all we really have to do, kind of like Morpheus was there. Like, somebody woke Morpheus up. He wasn't the first fucking monkey out of that matrix. So he kind of does his thing, and Neo in that model is like seeking. Like he's seeking his whole life, passing out, having books like Simulacrum or whatever, which is basically about simulation theory in a sense, in a philosophical sense, and getting into places where not everybody can tread. It doesn't make, it's, how do I even put it? Even in the Jewish temple system, it's like there's a general court where people can kind of trade and do things. There's a worship center, if you want to put it that way, where like Jews who say they're Jews are going to learn, and then there's like a holy of holies, which only one dude can kind of go into and talk to the presence of God or whatever, which I think I found interesting. You said the only thing, because I had asked about Freemasonry at some point to you, and you were like, all you have to do is believe in a higher power, which it's like nihilists. I
That's
can't,
true.
like,
Yeah,
I
I
can't
mean,
do it.
your higher power could secretly be Satan if you wanted it to be, I guess. The reality is that there is a Holy Bible in most American lodges, at least lodges that may be really rural in the sense that a lot of the city lodges that I've heard
It's like
about have
conservative culture.
yeah, kind of. They have a Torah and the Buddhist Book of Living and Dying is available at some lodges as far as the volume of sacred law goes. But at my lodge, we have just a Bible, and that's why that law that got passed in Washington Grand Lodge of saying volume of sacred law, not just the HB Holy Bible. I was like, thank you. I don't want to just be, succumbed or sequestered into some religious dogma just because it's there and the good old boys wanted to remain there. And so I would just omit that divine source whenever I was taking obligation and just I'm not necessarily a believer in a masculine creator God. I think it probably more or less has to do with the conjunction of masculine and feminine, more hermaphroditic
It's Ain Sof.
being.
Yeah, it's beyond duality.
Yeah, exactly. It's
On the
and
logo,
since we
just like you
are,
said, right?
yep, yep. And so there's a lot of I still I think patriarchy is still clinging by its fingernails to remain the stronghold in the country and the world right now, and it's just such a shame. Um,
Well, it's like Star
I'm
Wars.
just
I mean, look at the movies that are dropping, as within so without. Like the culture is, Hollywood to a large degree is a scrying mirror for us to see our psyche on. I get there's programming and all sorts of weird shit going on. It's not just like an innocent situation necessarily, but at some level, it's a reflection in terms of the
Dude,
collective consciousness.
there's Masonic programming. There's Masonic programming in TV. I've seen it in some of the shows my kids were watching. I was like, I stopped and like looked up from my book and I was like, what are you watching? What is this? How, what? Do you know what that means? It's like I can't remember the show right now, but it was definitely like, oh, I mean, anytime you hear the word on the level or square, or something having to do with that, it was like purposely in the 1930s and up to the 50s, Freemason jargon was interwoven into our culture to sort of keep that sort of idea in the back of people's minds. And like you were saying, all that jazz, a couple times you said it today, and I just got done doing the uh, dancing and singing in Chicago at the theater here on Orcas. So it's funny, we just did all that jazz. So there's a lot of
Perfect sync.
programming that happens. Yeah, and then the synchronicity is basically, especially reading Jung right now, I've been really all up in C. Jung, psychologist, psychoanalyst, and the fact that he was as astute as Freud, but split off into
Intuitive.
the oh, he was like he represented
Pretty
that
sure he was a
divine
Cancer.
feminine too. And so I think that marriage of that within Jung was a good way to transmute information to the rest of us, to put it in terms we understand. And I've had experiences sort of similar to what Carl did, and where not necessarily a table breaking, but I've definitely shared a house that had a shadow person in the house, and it was it I guess you could say haunted the house, and we had to sort of push that being out with witchcraft, which a friend of mine came, and she was a good witch and a light worker, so I had her clean the house, and I was part of the ritual there. So it's there's some things happening on this earthly plane that are not necessarily explainable for me. That's why I think my mind is the way it is, and I don't just think it's all uh, this or that or point blank what it is. I think there's some very hidden machinations that happen that many people aren't even aware of, and once you open to it,
And
it
somebody's
shows itself.
personal proclivities might make them more open to it. Like some people might have the shine. It's not a democratized situation, which is the weirdest part about life. Um, we tend to think in a post kind of democracy, Western idealistic situation that, in a weird ultimate way, it's a unified thing. If the Tao is the Tao, we're all participants, we're all witnesses to the Tao, and we're all kind of on that journey. So I think we're all on equal footing in that soul level, in a way. But it seemed, I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
not
yeah.
every monkey, it's like X-Men. Wolverine is not Jubilee, is not Storm, and everybody's got their own kind of sets of skills, and it all adds up to a puzzle that makes sense. I'm sure we can go down some different rabbit holes. I don't know. Maybe right now would be a good time for a music break if you have to pee or get a drink of water or anything.
I'm good to do whatever, man. I'm sitting here, I'm comfortable.
Word, Raphael, would you like to play music or no?
Sure, let's do it. We'll be back in about 4 minutes. If we were made in his image, then call us by our
By your
names.
name.
Heady track there. I've never heard that. Was that Erica Badu?
Of course.
Sexy. I think it's funny that this is the Hanged Man episode, 93rd episode, because in some way I think that's an illustration of kind of the process that we go through as individuals. Some of us choose to get on that tree of Yggdrasil, lose an eye for perspective, and maybe gain a vision into a realm or behind the veil in a way that maybe not everybody is designed to by free will or happenstance or however one wants to describe this ontologically. But those that are seeking will find what seeks them, like we just described before the break. I think it's funny that it's not surprising you're in Aries, so it's not and with a moon rising, a Cancer rising and a Cancer moon, that you're going to be into
Hmm.
kind of mysteries and pursuing the kind of feminine truth in a protrusive way. Like you're going forward into the yoni of life. Let's put it that
For sure, I hope so.
way. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I just being a student of the world, like you put it, is necessary, I think, and I just being open all the time because not everything does have an explanation, and there is a lot of black magic fuckery happening right now, and these people know that they're doing it, and so it takes a lot of the warriors of light, if you want to borrow from so many New Age words, to fight that with um, people that have been down dark roads. I've been down dark paths in lives and this life and seen horrible attributes in people, and so that's helped me to discern from who's true and who's not, so it's harder to, I guess, to be taken advantage of that way when you have a taste of that, and you can fight it when it comes around with light and love and compassion and understanding and not necessarily reaction. um, so that's important, and then the rest is all sort of pushing into these mysteries as hardcore as I can, but I feel like the more knowledge that I'm gaining from all of this, the less I know about the world. As funny as that is,
No, it's the
it's sort of
paradoxical
like,
nature of the bitch. That's how it is. I
oh,
mean,
it
even in
is
the Matrix, like Neo's the one. He's like, "Are you the one?" He's like, "I don't know, man. I'm not sure."
not right. I mean, the one doesn't necessarily know they're the one, and the one that claims they're the one is not the one. So it's sort of similar to that. And the person who claims he's a Gnostic is not really a Gnostic. So it's interesting. But I have to make notes now and fill up journals and things of my findings and my research because my mind just pushes out the stuff that it doesn't deem necessary at that moment. So I can't pull upon as much knowledge at the ready and abstractly as I used to be able to do in my younger years, I guess. But um, I definitely think that all of these ideas and philosophies, from the tarot to astrology to numerology, are part and participle of the same truth. And if you want to get into energetic field theory and how we're all connected, I mean, I've gone out of my body before when I was 15 years old, and I've never been back out there again by myself, my own volition. You know, I've wanted to go into the astral realm again, but it only happened once for me. But once was enough to prove to me that this was a real place, and it was tangible, and time sort of slows down and stops. And so,
What were the
I've
conditions
done.
of that experience?
Oh, okay, yeah, it was LSD for sure.
At 15? I
Yeah,
guess
I
that's
was
not too young.
into.
Okay, okay.
Well, I grew up at I wasn't always on the island here. I grew up in Texas and a few other places, so I was thrown into the real world growing up real quick, pretty fast. And first cigarette at like 12 or 13, and then marijuana was at 13 for me, and then all these other drugs at 14, 15, 16, just because of the crew and people that I was with at the time, set and setting, that was what they did, and you couldn't say no to them, and I had nowhere to go, so I was part of the crew, and what they did I could do better sometimes is what I felt like.
How
So
Aries.
I was opened to altered states of consciousness and other realms by 15, and I know it wasn't a trip that I went on because it was actually a moment that I was freaking out. I was starting to lose touch of reality, and I felt this like strange thing. Basically, I laid down on my friend's couch, and the second I hit the couch, my consciousness just pushed itself out through my third eye, and then when I came back into my body, it was 7 hours later. But it wasn't a dream. There was no courting of a dream-like state. There was no like, this wasn't an extended trip. It was literally, I think my brain was just like, all right, you've had too much, get out, and like kicked me out so it could do its healing on me that it needed to do or whatever.
That's
And
funny. I'll
so
recant a real quick story.
crazy.
Hit mute while you're not on this so I don't hear myself looping. Thanks. It's not your fault. Your new program for you. And speaking of which, that's one thing I'll say before this little story about astral projection that I also have done it once, but I was sober, but it was under very stressful. I mean, I think I was secreting natural DMT, let's put it that way. But we're all programs in a machine at some level. So the trick I think is becoming aware of programmability and then choosing better or worse programs. What happens is a lot of people are just, born into a prison that they're not even aware of or whatever, kind of matrix style. And that there's a moment in kind of individuation, it seems, where you punctuate and say, oh my gosh, it's like, black iron prison and oh, this is all fucking matrix. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. But it's like, this is where it seems to be the happening place of the cosmos, at least in a lot of, like almost a Slaughterhouse-5 kind of way. It's like, this is the party in a lot of ways and of experience, of dualistic experience. So, kind of reintegrating into the programmability and trying to program yourself, it seems like it's part of what the Freemason thing is. It's like, look, you're an engineer. Let's engineer you. Like, you can do this yourself. You've chosen to do this. And not everybody's going to do that. But anyway, real quick story. It's funny that you said about astral projection. If Rafa, if you got any stories, I want to hear it too. Probably in high school, I think I was 16, maybe 17. Basically, I started waking up in 2003, my senior year of high school, and long story short, I had a mushroom trip where I didn't have any, like, I even ate the mushrooms, and my brother and my friend are like seeing shit and all this stuff, and I'm not having visuals, but I'm having like the pure gnosis of the fractal nature of reality. Like, I was just like, oh my God, I see it. It's like a fucking,
Yes.
the water
Yeah.
is the fucking bloodstream, is the, like, I wasn't tripping. It was just like, awareness, like in a pure way. And it just started fucking with me. Ask my brother anytime anybody listened to this, like if I had a fractal quote unquote stage, because this is pre-YouTube and shit, and I was just like, everything's a fractal. And he's like, chill on that shit, bro. And I was like manic about it for a few months.
Now everyone knows.
Well, yeah. Well, that's the beauty of it. I'm glad. In an Akashic sense, it's like we're all rising up together. I was not alone, but like nobody was talking about this, and I was not mentored or guided or anything. I didn't have the cultural wherewithal to even understand what the fuck was going on. I was going to teachers.
Same here.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, in a way, we signed up for that, so that's cool. Like pioneers of the wilderness, like Lewis and Clark style. It's like, oh shit, that's a grizzly. Like as opposed to like some taxidermist back on the East Coast of the Smithsonian being like, I have a grizzly bear pelt or whatever. It's a very different situation in the fucking front lines of consciousness, it seems. But especially when you're not like initiated by others, it was like a self-initiation. Anyway, that mushroom trip, let's say it was in September or something. And for a few months, I'm going to my math teachers and like pastor and stuff. I'm like, I think I've had the revelation, whatever that might mean. I'm like, I think I see everything as like part of a system and it's this fractal thing. And like, they just were not, they were like, yo, chill out. And one math teacher was like, go watch 2001: A Space Odyssey and Easy Rider was his advice. So that was kind of cool. I ended up reading 2001, the book. Yeah, Easy Rider is hardcore in terms of like moral kind of American understanding of reality. Very situated in it's a time capsule for sure. But anyway, long story short, I'm being long-winded, my bad. I got kind of self-righteous and I was smoking mad weed and I was like, I'm done with that shit. I'm going to start running on this treadmill and drinking green tea and only having one tuna fish sandwich. It got very ascetic. Like out of nowhere, I was reading books on Zen Buddhism and Taoism in like 2001: A Space Odyssey at the library. And basically I was in dual enrollment in high school at the time. So I had free, like, it was like early bird, first, second, third, done for the day. So, and during like November was like Thanksgiving break or whatever the fuck in college. So I didn't have any classes to go to. And I was like, for some reason, this is like guided by the spirit, or I don't know how to put this in a way that one might not feel religious overtones, but it was just like, I had this understanding that I had to do some things. So I was like, I'm just going to start running on the treadmill, in my house at the highest level, like on 10 for like an hour or two and listen to one song, like G Unit or The Police, Sting and the Police, or whatever I was listening to at the time. I put on one track and I just listened to it, get into a super high trance state, like sprinting for like an hour or two on this treadmill and just like zoning. And then I'd hop off and get in a seated lotus position and basically get my breathing to the longest measures I could, to like music and just thinking my Buddha third eye or whatever the fuck I was thinking. And I did this for like a week or two, like no reason, it wasn't like I felt compelled to do it. Let's just put it that way. And then at the end, I was listening to Alan Parsons' Project I, Robot, which is a dope concept album by the guy who produced Dark Side of the Moon. If you haven't heard, it's funky and about like Isaac Asimov's I, Robot kind of concepts, AI and self-awareness. So I'm listening to this concept album and I straight up sitting there breathing after all this shit, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of doing this dumb, rigorous kind of self-mutilation or whatever the fuck I'm doing. And, I pop up out of my body, astral project, and I wasn't expecting this. I didn't have anybody tell me this is even a possibility, right? Like it wasn't like it was not on my radar. So I was like kind of sitting up astrally, my silver body, looking around, kind of like, because you're saying you did this in some other kind of abstract way with psychedelics, but it's definitely real, folks. You can do this. Floated around, went to some fucking. I was like, saw Earth. I was like, fuck yeah, let's go as far as I can. Got to this like newest sphere, like 4D kind of mental sphere of like see-through mountains, kind of like Taoist art or something. Very much like Tron in the new Daft Punk soundtrack film Tron.
On the way to Shambhala, you were.
Something, right? The Outlands, where it's just like this holographic kind of not there. Actually, Alex Gray has a very good image that looks like it, like Theolog, where it's these like holographic kind of mountains. Anyway, chilling on these mountains, met Jesus there, whatever I thought Jesus was. He pointed to like kind of this like abyssal situation, and he was like, I went there so you didn't have to, and I slammed back into my body. Very Gnostic experience for me. One of the reasons I'm still a Christian, because it's like, that's not like a felt board Sunday school lesson or something my parents told me. I experienced something very viscerally, whether it's ultimately true or a projection of my programming at the time or whatever, that's debatable. But anyway, we are more than we think, but this place matters quite a bit given the circumstances. Kind of the whole point of my saying any of that.
For sure, yeah. There's rules.
There's always rules.
Well, I just mean that they're like when you put it into terms of this is just a holographic reality simulation. People think, oh, well, then we shouldn't take it seriously. No, but there's serious consequences and concepts that are materialized in this world for sure. It's like part of the living matrix that we're beholden to the laws of it, the natural laws. And so I do think what you're saying is true, is that we have we're not just our physical bodies. I don't think I'm going to die whenever I die. My spirit's going to go back to whatever great source spirit, and maybe I'll be back for Earth number 7 with all of you, and you're going to be my cousin or something, or my brother or my
Not
sister.
again.
Who knows how, right? It's
I'm
like
joking.
if you want to think about coming back into different bodies and God, what did Plato call it?
Transmigration of the soul.
Transmigration of souls. Yeah. So I mean, it's I kind of subscribe to a lot of those thought processes, as well as the thought process that are through the crystallization alchemy of DMT, we crystallize our souls into these bodies. And so in a sense, our pineal gland is like a radio receiver receiving the frequency to crystallize into this body and experience everything we have. That's why we could sometimes project through that third eye. And while so many cultures, including the Pope of this current day, has a staff with a pine cone leading up to a cross on it, and if you want to think about the cross is also found in the Tetractys, which is, Pythagorean
I want to get that
mathematics.
inked. The 10 dots.
I do too.
Yeah, that's what's up.
But finding someone who can really do good line work is important to me, so I haven't done that yet. And like even Pythagoras was on to the whole, with his Pythagorean why. It was earthly wisdom and divine wisdom. The youth and initiate starts at the base of the spine, if you want to talk Kabbalistically, and works their way up. And then they reach that split or in the tree that goes to divine wisdom and earthly wisdom. And so I think a lot of Freemasonry and all these different rites of passage places have modeled their initiations and rituals off of that. And so I mean, I don't know, it's so crazy, man. I mean, even so, thinking about all of this, and I feel like I'm still scratching on the surface because there's so much unexplained, and we may never get to a point in this life with such short amount of years, up to 100 or so, that we can figure this out. And maybe it's not our place to figure this out, and that's just us being humans wanting to figure it out because we're, gnashing our teeth trying to find the answers. It can't just be us
Like
in the
there's
universe.
no answer. I think that's the weird thing. It's like, okay, so I hear you where you're not a natural material reductionist. I don't think any of us in this room right now are. We're all pretty spiritual, but that is because of the phenomenological experiences we've had. It's not just because someone tells us we have a spirit. We've had gnosis for ourselves, for our own understanding, and that
Something
inner
jarring,
sanctum.
yeah.
Yeah, dude, and it's crazy. When you're saying Solomon's Temple, you're building your inner Solomon's Temple. I think not everybody initiates into doing that. Some people just want to kind of like, and it's in a weird way. I have to pull back and say that's their karma, that's their choice. They get to choose red pill or not. They get to choose if they want to be Neo or just like Siler, basically, and like ignorance is bliss.
It's so true, yeah. Yep, it's so true. You're associating it with the Matrix, and in a lot of ways, that movie hit the nail on the head with metaphorical ideas about what's happening in this reality. And once you take that pill, though, to wake up, man, and I've said it time and time again since I, quote unquote, opened my eyes, you can't really go back to ignorance after that point. So everything is a new revelation every day that you wake up and can experience the mysteries of life again. It's crazy. And yeah, I think Freemasonry is great, and so are all the others, though. All those other Thelemic magic practices, and I don't even care about the Satanists. They can do. In fact, I've known one Satanist in life many years ago, and I don't even think that they thought that they were truly a Satanist or understood what that meant. But I think their whole main line is like what Eliphas Levi said, or Aleister Crowley, that thy will be done, thy will is the whole of the law. And they just want to be free to do what they want to do and not be proselytized to about other religions.
This is the
So
93rd episode. I think it's funny that's coming up because at the end of the day, like I'm not a left-hand pather. I'm not into Crowley particularly. That's not my flavor. I think just like Anakin can go kill a bunch of Padawans and get dark energy stuff, it's like there's other ways to do that. You can kind of be Yoda and chill about it. I'd much prefer that. But at the end of the day, we are all necessarily doing what we want. Like that is what's happening. We are observers in a neutral kind of holographic reality that influence the dimensional kind of coordinates of the multiverse that we're in, and we experience the lessons we need. And then it's almost like group solipsism is how I always put it, where it's like I kind of live between two mantras, if you want to put it that way. All you touch and all you see is all your life will ever be, which is a Pink Floyd line, which is like existentialism essentially. It's like I can't tell you what being a black woman is like, or transsexual, or those aren't my reality tunnels, so I can't really speak into those things. But at the same time, Neil Young says there's more to the picture than meets the eye. Having that humility, understanding that my perspective isn't the perspective, and kind of living in that tension allows me to kind of move freely. But Raphael, you've been kind of quiet. I'm kind of curious as to what your perspective is on just being in a diamond in the lotus or something.
Something. Kindly be slightly more specific.
Well, I think what happens, maybe I'm tripping, because let's just say this COVID situation, I'm into astrology. We had this massive Capricorn and or Saturn and Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, which is about institutions. The North Node was in Cancer, and now it's in Gemini. Just a lot of things happening in the zeitgeist at an energetic level as above, that are having ramifications on the programming of the as below, really, quite frankly. And long story short, the patriarchy is kind of coming to its end. It's a Tower card moment. Trump Tower. I mean, that's not a joke. And I'm not into QAnon or into Trump. I did not vote for him.
Right.
But like, he seems to be a harbinger of change in a way that is actually going to be putting a fucking, baseball bat into the moving wheel, bicycle tire or something. It's like, this is how it starts. Like, this is the edge of a black hole. Like, post 2012, I think very strongly, and I think Gemini Brett, thinks the same thing. I don't know how you feel. Sounds like you started getting initiated and stuff at 2012. That was very much a threshold of an event horizon that we're now kind of
the end of the
crossed.
Mayan long count calendar. Yeah,
exactly.
That was whenever everybody thought the world was going to end that year, and then the next day we were like, oh, it didn't end. And that's when we sort of realized that 2012 was sort of the big awakening for another generation of people, healers or light workers or people just to wake up and say, hey, there's some weird shit happening. And I'm pretty sure people plan this weird shit by going into a star room and judging when Mars is triune, or I'm not an astrologist, but I have heard these things. Gemini Brett and I were talking once about the fact that some congressional members and statesmen do what the ancients did and talk to an astrologer before they plan their big moves or their money-making moves, and it sounds hokey.
Quincy
to a lot
Jones
of people.
does it. Yeah, dude.
Right.
Like,
it sounds really it sounds like woo-woo, but at the same time, you can almost count these events or coordinate them with astronomical events sometimes, and that's too much of a coincidence. I think there are no coincidences.
Right. I mean, I'll say this, and then I'll clarify kind of what I was asking Raphael. Astrology is essentially, it seems, the algorithmic clock of a lot of levels of things. That doesn't mean it's the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Like, I don't know if Aries was an archetype to Cro-Magnon man. I don't know in 10,000 years if we'll be dealing with these things. Like, it seems at some level a condition of the Tao that we reflect in our consciousness, and therefore we like kind of Marshall McLuhan Ouroboros feedback loop into. So it's like we're aware of these stories and archetypes, we grow through them, et cetera, et cetera. I wouldn't be surprised if galactic levels of things start kicking on with the age of Aquarius. When Jupiter entered Sagittarius a year and a half, 2 years ago, that's when I started being even willing to concede the idea of starseeds and stuff. Before then, I'm like, I don't believe in aliens, and if there are aliens, I'm afraid of them. And now I'm like, oh shit, I'm probably a starseed, blah, 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 blah. Like, it's totally different vibes. I don't think these conditions of the Tao were going to be happening before 2012. It's kind of like the soup is what it is when you make it, and some soups and wines take a little longer to age. We're in a I don't even know, like a crib or something of consciousness.
Melting pot.
Well, Jung would say, yeah, we're in a soup cooking ourselves or whatever, right? So it's like, this is just this big alchemical apotheosis. We're all one big thing, experiencing self individually and then learning through the kind of, like a coral reef is like a mass consciousness of nodes. It's kind of like that, where it's like
like
one
an
big
osmosis that happens, or the 100th monkey syndrome of generation of humans, when maybe so many, as far as parameters go, so many of the humans awaken, it causes a paradigm shift. And that's sort of like the 100th monkey, where 99 monkeys were washing their fruit in the river, and finally when the 100th monkey did, monkeys of that same kind all over the world were doing that, almost in a form of osmosis, where there was no way they could have translated that information to each other than by some akashic method or some supernatural way or superluminal way, whatever you want to call it.
Right, language fails, quite frankly. I'm a double Gemini with Chiron and Gemini, so language does fail at some point, because when we say like metaphysics or supernatural, it's like any technology indiscernible to us is magic, right? Kind of thing, Arthur C. Clarke style.
Exactly. Yes.
So we're in like a machine of consciousness experiencing it in a holographic way, but like that has conditions. Just like in a video game like Mario, the first level is like, go get that, hit that square, get the coin, go get that mushroom, go down to the basement if you want and see these like, Goombas or whatever, come up, get the flag. By the time you get to Bowser, it's a very fundamentally different like nature of the game. Long story short, recently the astrology has been such that it's like Bowser's are like, I mean, this is the whole David Icke situation coming out recently saying, just all levels of things. This wouldn't have happened before the internet. This wouldn't have happened before kind of the temperature of the room was at a certain place. Like now we're having like, you can't have mushrooms grow, kind of in a Terence McKenna stoned ape theory. Mushrooms have to have certain conditions.
Yeah.
Like desertification fucks it up, and that's why we might have switched from, mushroom cults to like alcohol cults basically. But
to solar worship cults. Yep.
Yeah, you get what I'm throwing down. But so like the conditions change, and that means, in a Merovingian matrix kind of way, it's like cause and effect. That's very much the Buddhist thing, right? It's like certain causes have certain effects. Crowley said that. It's like if you do certain things will follow. It's just like how it works sometimes. That's a level.
It goes so below the surface of it, your first waking thoughts could dictate your energy for the day, and those people that come around you, or like the Buddha said, if you're an angry person and you're walking around just normally, somebody could come up and just punch you for no reason, but that's because it's the law of attraction. You're attracting that vibe to you. And so I think a lot of people are purposely kept neutral with TV and television programming, and the curriculum in the schools is, they don't want you to ask questions. They don't want you to be individualized thinkers. This is part of the old playbook that's been happening actually for probably 40 or 50 years. And I mean, I'm only 35, but I'm awake enough to be like, hey, man, the wool's being pulled over our eyes, and a lot of subversive ways of look over here while this here is happening over here, but don't look at this, look at that. And it's like there's an old expression having to do with the crown and the tiara and the church, and how the mob of people are the ones that execute the punishment because we're followers. And so I think well,
it's the whole Dionysian
it's hard.
myth or whatever. I mean, if you've read Manly P. Hall and the Secret Teachings of the Ages, there's a moment where it's like very occulted stuff where it's like, yo, like this guy gets torn up by the ignorant masses.
Yeah, so that's right back to Cyrus again and his being torn to pieces. And
same as it ever was, as David Byrne would say. My favorite Scotsman, probably. It's funny because I heard this before, Raphael. I totally spaced on what I was going to ask. I just wanted you to kind of throw in some Bashar raw material stuff because you're good at that. And I'm like, you hear what we're talking about. But one quick thing, and then I want to kind of see where Raphael's head is at, if he has any questions kind of thing. Yes, maybe Freemasonry has at one level kind of it's almost like quantum. We're in a quantum age. That's post-modernity. Like we cross into a place now where it's like it isn't binary. It's both and. It's wave and particle. We're aware of that. So there's a simultaneity, and that cognitive dissonance can, much like in 2001: A Space Odyssey, some monkeys touch the obelisk, some monkeys don't. And if you touch the obelisk, you go onto a trajectory where you end up on the moon. If you're those monkeys touching that obelisk on the moon, you go to Jupiter. It's like it's an initiation for those who seek. But Mason in French, where I mean, I'm not sure about the whole lineage, but I'm pretty sure Freemasonry kind of has some level of French history. Maison means house or building, and like not that free is exactly like libre is free, and like in French it's not a direct translation, but I think what happens is people who start Buddha awakening, like because Buddha means awake, it doesn't, it means I'm awake to the situation, I'm cognizant, I can see it for what it is. And I don't think he thought he was better or worse. He was just like, I found a way to fucking unlock my potential. And I can build my own Solomon's Temple, my own house. And I could show you guys how you've been maybe constructing through cultural inheritance or genetic inheritance or karma or whatever. And there's ways to kind of nullify this and be your own programmer. I mean, that's ultimately what we're trying to do because we're in some kind of electrical thing. I've seen some great memes before where it's showing like Egypt from above. And then it's like showing like, like a motherboard or something. And it's just like, y'all, like we are conscious conduits of energy, like you were saying earlier, biochemical computers. And that is an analogy that breaks down and becomes kind of existentially weird at some point. But it's like we're in a simulation of consciousness and meat suit experience. These are the most fully engrossing, VR suits you could ask for. It's like we have full
We
sensory
are
experience.
meat. Yeah, meat suits for sure.
So, Raphael, you hear kind of where I'm going with all this. What are your 2 cents? And if you need me to be more specific, I will. But I feel like you have nuggets that I'm not specifically digging for, but I know that are there.
Okay, well, I just have a different question for Ian. Basically, whether you're familiar with Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma, because there he's also specifically getting into this whole idea of, let's say, the deliberate confusion, something along the lines that only the princes elect shall truly be led into the inner courtyard. This may now be seen as a, smart way, like the Zen master does it, not to be disturbed, or in a nefarious sense in terms of, people deliberately getting confused. But you kind of actually already discussed that whole idea. Then there's another aspect. If we say now we're on the same wavelength, obviously, in terms of basically sharing information, let's call it X share. There is the apparently prophecy, let's say, by Rudolf Steiner from about 1906. And apparently back then he was releasing all his material and said, okay, whatever, let's just publish everything we can, and a few other anthroposophist writers at that time saw the same issue. They basically realized that scientific reductionism and materialism in a bad way is slowly taking over. And they said, okay, we release everything now, basically to kind of save, I don't know, the Gnostic flame, however you would want to put it. And also at that
Gotta
point,
keep
he
that
said,
funk alive.
yeah, but he said that also at that point, if we don't manage now, and obviously they didn't, because what came afterwards was like oil and scarcity business, to the power of square, haha. And then he said, okay, if we don't manage now, then in 100 years, we will have another chance. And this would be right around the time right now. So let's say about 2016. And I'd be interested into as what your view is. And even in terms of life expectancy, I'm kind of interested because we were talking about 100 years. Maybe some are familiar with the different lifespans presented in the Bible. And at least with things like C60, we even have already publicly available tools, let's say, where we may greatly be able to extend our life. And while I'm totally on the wave of, not like the Skeksis in Dark Crystal, needing to extend my life because I'm completely with you, we're much greater than this. And when we choose to leave, it's going to be for a good reason and it's going to be just fine. But especially also in considering that we want to even potentially, let's say, quote unquote, build civilization. Shouldn't then life extension in the most, let's say, healthy and vital way also be one of our core interests, potentially even just to have the time to understand, just as you mentioned?
Yeah, totally. That was a lot to process for sure, but I get it. And Albert Pike is one of those gentlemen scholars of masonry that a lot of our rituals, especially for the Scottish Rite, are based off of his rituals that he initiated into this craft. He brought them up from the old French Masonic. So Jim, you're right. French Masons are a big deal and are interwoven into our craft in a variety of ways and a variety of the higher up degrees. And Albert Pike, I do have several copies of Morals and Dogma, and it's hard to read. I like reading. I'm a writer, so I can read college level and even some very whimsically written linguistic exercises, I should say.
Finnegan's Wake.
Yeah. Oh, not even just Finnegan's Wake. I was reading something the other day. It was just a doctor of linguistics, I should say, wrote this academic paper. It's called Incessance. You can look it up, Incessance. And the whole thing is just so confusing, but brilliant piece of work. And Albert Pike is, in a lot of ways, as very lengthy and broad in his descriptive terms. And it's really boring to read if I want to just be really frank about it. But I do admire some of the attributes that Albert Pike pointed out. But the reality is, for me, I think Manly Palmer Hall was closer to getting with the intuitive side of Freemasonry, where Albert Pike was just going like, guys, your rituals are crap. Let me just give you the real stuff. And here's what I feel about it. And
So Pike is the Freud to Manly P. Hall being the Jung.
Bingo. Yeah. Yep, totally. And Pike is still like a, ever-present reminder of how to scrutinize your ritual and make sure it is able to be understood by the candidate, because we do need the candidates to understand some aspects of what we're saying, so it doesn't just go over their head completely. And yes, there is I forget which degree. I'm actually looking at a book right now that has a lot of Pike in it. When you become a Scottish Rite Mason, you have the ability to become sort of more knowledgeable by taking a program called the Master Craftsman program, and it's a series of quizzes that they snail mail to you, and I've taken part in quite a few of them, so I'm well on the way to receiving some whatever this, I don't know what it is, some degree, if you will, in
Some
Master
Air
Craftsman.
5, some high five.
Yeah,
They're like,
I
yo,
don't.
dude, you're in.
I don't even care really. I just want the access to the knowledge. So I have it in one of the books is called A Bridge to Light by Rex R. Hutchins, and it's a study in Masonic ritual and philosophy. And it, it's got everything from the Pythagorean Tetractys to the Kabbalah and Pike as well. So Pike did contribute a lot to the craft. I would say that I probably, if I were in the same room as him, though, he probably wouldn't like me and how open I was with my understanding of things and my reasoning. And I would probably think he was too old school for my liking anyway. But, there was that contribution that he made. And I have a couple different books from Pike. I wouldn't say his is the end-all be-all word on Masonic stuff, and I'm pretty sure that's just his opinion, man. If I was to quote the dude from the Big Lebowski.
Perfect. That's one of my fucking favorite movies. Good job.
Oh yeah, mine too. But Manly P, he just hits the nail on the head every time I think about the symbols and what they mean to me as a person and as a spiritual person, and how to delve deep. And it's hard to say. I don't have the answer for everybody. I just think as long as people keep seeking and keep uncovering these things and then keep teaching them to other people who are like-minded.
And to ourselves.
Yeah, of course, to ourselves. We have to remind ourselves. And just to circle back real quick, it's funny how all these psychedelic experiences, I mean, I've done everything from ayahuasca to DMT to salvia to LSD and stuff. So I've been across the board with it, and I've been very much a psychonaut in my early years.
You're Team Rabbit Hole. I knew it.
Oh yeah, bro. I'm way down there. I'm sitting there on the mushrooms smoking that hookah with, the caterpillar dude or whatever it was.
I feel like the caterpillar is Raphael and the Cheshire Cat or some shit.
So the reality is that I have seen this matrix with my eyes, and although I was under the influence at the time of various things, including ayahuasca, that was the same vision I saw every single time. It was like a matrix or a lattice work, like a web work that was vibratory and made noise. If you could hear it, it was like wah 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 wah, and it's very much frequency and vibration. And so there's no way to refute, in my eyes, the fact that we're part of this. So, what were we talking about, Raphael? About Pike?
That was one of those
got
things.
lost.
Then he ended up asking you a question about Rudolf Steiner life expectancy and stuff.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, so yeah, with CRISPR technology and with all this gene editing that happens,
that's not the road I'm talking about, but that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, but you said something about C60. Is that
Right.
Isn't that olive oil or something?
Well, it's usually dissolved in olive oil here. This was usually,
Okay, that's what
but it's the red one. This was initially found as an industrial
Buckminster
lubricant.
fullerene.
Right, exactly. And just super
okay.
antioxidative and showed in a study with rats crazy increase in life expectancy.
For sure, because, well, if you want to think about it, I've heard this before and it made kind of good sense to me. What if the fact that while we're here, oxygen is really just killing us? It just takes 70 to 100 years to do so. And it does so by producing the production of free radicals in your skin, which hunt for oxygen in your cells and deplete it. And
That's a
the
mind
interesting
fuck.
part.
Gemini Brett
is
said, what if
because-
we're already dead at 2012? It's like that level of mindfuck. I'm like, what if oxygen's
Oh,
killing
yeah.
us? Oh my god.
Exactly, yeah. And so I actually I'm the purchasing director for a cosmetic raw materials distribution company. It's actually a company that my mother owns, so it's a family business and it's become quite the
Shout
global
out, mom.
con contender. I won't name drop on here or anything, but we craft lotions and we don't really craft anything, but we supply people who do. And so one of the things we do supply is ingredients to help prevent damage by free radicals. And and those are our anti-aging ingredients. So sure, if we could unlock those secrets, that'd be great. Would you really want to live 200 to 300 years? I don't think I would, to be honest. I want to go to the other side. I got friends and family over there.
Well, me too, but if we turn it around here within, let's say, 20 to 30 years, I'm good with staying a few more hundred, you know?
I
That would
guess
be
so,
the
yeah.
point, I guess.
For sure, if there was a golden age of philosophy or some commingling of science and spirituality, which has been talked about for hundreds and thousands of years back to the Atlanteans who probably had that technology, and the word is that they caused the cataclysm of the Great
Party
Flood or
foul.
whatever. Yeah, right. I've read all this stuff, man. My fingers and eyes and ears have been involved in every bit of conspiracy theory to radical philosophies and I love it, man. It's just we're trying to figure it out. We're not satisfied with what's going on. If my bro over there is hurting, how can I be happy? It's like that whole experiment in Africa that this British guy did where he put like this prize and of chocolates and stuff at the base of this tree and had the kids in a big circle around the tree and said the first one of you to get it gets the candy, yay. And they all held hands and they all walked into the middle of the circle. It's like
Woke.
why would we one of us want one thing and lavish in it while the others are suffering? And so I think this whole situation where not everybody's awake yet is probably part of the plan. It's fortuitous
Most definitely,
because
dude. I mean, it seems
yeah,
to where we are, and just not hint. I mean, my presupposition is that we are most definitely heading into a golden era. Raphael might be able to speak more explicitly about that because of some of the stuff he's been into. I don't know if you're into reading Daryl or Bashar, who's channeled by Daryl Anka, or any of this stuff. I'll
I
say
have
one
heard
thing.
a bunch of Bashar on YouTube. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. So you kind of get that's the flavor Raphael's coming in hot with. Um, One thing I'll say really quick, and then I kind of want to hear Raphael, like, if you're going to spin this, not in a positive way, but like, how can we kind of view it from your perspective at best? Because I know we talk about it a lot, but obviously Ian, this is his first time in the hot seat, so maybe, I don't know, maybe you could throw a nugget at him that might hit him in a good spot. But ironically, so Team Rabbit Hole came about because, long story short, I was eating a lot of acid, listening to like Alan Watts and McKenna lectures and Daft Punk and fucking around on Facebook back in 2014. And at some point, I was making hashtags like singularity or bust and silly things like that. And at one point, I made Team Rabbit Hole because it's like the royal we, like in a Big Lebowski sense. And we're all going down this fucking initiatory path together, whether we're awake about it or not. We're all on this fucking boat. The boat across the sea of, the Osirian boat of Ra or whatever the fuck it is. We're doing this thing together. We're embarked, right? Here we are. And the first fucking post I ever made in Team Rabbit Hole, if you go back, I have this meme page. It's got like, 10,000 followers, whatever the fuck it is now. The first fucking post is Manly P. Hall's initiation of the pyramid. Like, I had just turned on to that on acid or something. I was like, this is what's up. Oh my God, it's blow, so blow. Oh, here we go, here we go. And nobody gave a shit about it. So I decided drug memes were the way to kind of tickle people up to awareness, and myself included. But, Raphael, give us kind of a quick synopsis or any kind of, I don't know, Zen Cohen or anything you think appropriate, in terms of where you see things are in terms of the game, the checkerboard of duality and the game we're playing, and maybe the destination of consciousness, given the zeitgeist presently.
Well, as we have discussed on the show, it's the apocalypse, which is amazing and awesome and can be most positive. And aside from that, I would just ask, I mean, I'm already afraid of saying it wrong. It's Ian. No, Ian. Ian.
It's Ian.
It's Ian.
It's Ian.
Ian.
E.
You European,
I.
you.
That's an E.
It's our fault.
E, but
English.
it's an
What have we
I.
done?
Yeah, you should have adopted German. I heard there was a vote at some point in America and they almost passed German for the state's official language. So just by the way. Um,
Oh, I knew that.
That's
Yeah,
funny.
Man of the High Tower or Man of the High
My mother
Castle
was
shit.
born. My was born in Heidelberg, Germany, actually.
Interesting.
Okay, so here we go. So, you already pointed it out in terms of, the all being one and the seeking aspect and so on. And then I would just ask myself, everyone can ask themselves, okay, then I can be aware now I already sent myself here. I have decided then these and these ideas are interesting and these experiences. And then overall I can choose, let's say, the story arc or something. And then if I just look at this logically, including all the potential, pain and suffering and not so comfortable things, pretty much anyone listening probably had to quote unquote endure or chose to some extent, then you're like, okay, what's the grand scheme here gonna be now? And at least for myself and for this life, I can say that to the extent that I have a choice in it. And unfortunately, I believe we have up to an ultimate choice, each unto themselves. Then I will most certainly choose the, absolute transformation of this society and, the entire planet in consequence, but just because human perception will be shifting. But yeah, I mean, what else? And it's true that there have always been, prophecies here and there that I'm like, okay, who if not you or us? And when if not now? And I actually think even looking at the quote unquote circumstance, this may very well greatly turn out, let's say, in the X share in terms of sharing the knowledge, light, favor.
I'm all about
I
it.
hope so.
Go ahead.
I wasn't always, or I should say, I haven't always been, what's the word? Positive about
Optimistic.
a pessimist. Yeah, I haven't always been an optimist, but I did for a long time remain a pessimist because of things I've seen in life that they destroyed my view of humanity and what people were capable of. But then, as you know, meeting my wife and a few other people that I call tribe, I got back into the whole optimism thing, and the reality is I would like there to be a radical transformation as well. I don't think it's going to come about violently. I think there's contingency plans to thwart that violent uprising, and it's probably not going to benefit the message that people want to get out. I also think that the call to action is buried in the minutia of everyday life, unfortunately, in the everyday life of memes to TV to TikTok to Instagram. And that's a shame. But at the same time, it's part of the noosphere that was talked about, where it's this age of information and knowledge that is so accessible and at the ready that it is like the physical manifestation of the Akashic record. And we have that now with the internet. And all systems are capable of corruption. So if you keep those things in mind, and everybody has this common goal to benefit everybody and not just themselves, armed with historical information and the desire for positive change can't be a bad thing.
Awareness and compassion at the highest degrees combined. Why not? Like, that sounds like a golden age to me. I think what's coming to mind, just in kind of, because I do want to talk about music for a second. We haven't really talked about your DJing. And we got as long as you want, but I'm sure at some point you're going to be like, I have a life to live. I got to go. It seems in terms of Freemasonry, there's a quote I had heard before in terms of basically, communism or Christianity or anything. It's like, don't judge a philosophy by its adherents all the time. So I think there's been some people within certain circles of reality, whether it's Freemasonry or not, who have maybe kind of played the game selfishly and done weird things, and that's their karma. We'll figure out why. Like, Judas has to pull a trigger for there to be a crucifixion, so that maybe some people have to play a bad role for things to go forward in a certain thelemic kind of thinking.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. Catalysts, like, we've talked about that before. And Manly B. Hall in Secret Teachings gets into a point where he's talking. I mean, Raphael could probably sync it up better than I can. But long story short, like, stubbing your toe against the devil because that makes you raise your foot to get to the next level or whatever. It's like that.
That's
you know
great.
what I mean?
I love that.
Like obstructions cause us to try differently.
It's
and
the
harder.
chapter on the Kabbalistic keys to the creation of man, if you have it on photographic memory for some reason, where Adam is going back to the Garden of Eden, is confronted with a snake who turns into an angel, who turns into God, basically, and tells him, I have been the tempter who has achieved your salvation because I have weaned thee of desire, and so on and so forth.
5:55 here,
Yes.
but of course. No, I think that's
Nice.
the hardest pill to swallow, where it is this kind of detached thing, hold on loosely in a Buddhist sense, where it's like, y'all, this is a weird dualistic kind of game, and there's stakes, but the stakes are awareness. It's I read the Emerald, or heard the audiobook of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which if it's fiction, it's the fucking Lord of the Rings 2.0, and if it's fact, it's like holy tits, this is amazing. But the point is, we're like, we all just have to shine a light on the way, right? The gnosis, that flame of the interior, stoke that fire, however that looks to you, whether it's, sitting around singing Kumbaya and eating drugs, or if it means going to Freemasonic lodges, or if it means searching the internet for Morpheus, or whatever the fuck it means for an individual.
Well, I just gotta say, guys, I don't find a lot of those, what should I say, realizations in the Freemasonic Lodge. I'm not trying to betray my brethren or anything worldwide, but I found a lot of these truths in the periphery. And so that was just in life and in my psychedelic experiences and in other organizations like the Rosicrucians, which I've also been a neophyte in as well. So it's Masonry is not also doesn't have all the answers, just like ayahuasca doesn't have all the answers when you're going into it to cure yourself of whatever. And so, yeah, I think gnosis, knowledge is important, and I don't have advice for anybody other than to keep on your path, and you don't hurt me, and I won't hurt you, and we're good to go, and everybody's walking each other home. That's the truth.
Ram Dass got
But
it. R.I.P.
yeah, I could segue into my music for a sec. My phone is
Definitely.
dying, and that's what I'm using as the primary transmitter here, but it's okay. I actually started as a DJ in 2001 with two turntables and 50 records, and I started with UK Hard House and Energy as just a baseline to train myself how to match beats, and then I spent 5 or 6 years learning that, and then another 2 or 3 years being a drum and bass DJ specifically. And so drum and bass and jungle are very much in my soul, and I love drum and bass and jungle, and it's like riding a bike. Anytime I DJ it, I can whip up a good set. And music for me is like very much plays into that whole particle and wave, and that shamanism through music is what I call it, and that's my way to connect to people through my soul and spirit. And so I don't have a website or anything. I just go by Bodhicypha, and you could find it on SoundCloud and Mixcloud and things like that. But um, I it was priority in my life to be distributed widely and known as a DJ and producer a few years ago, but then my priorities changed, and I care less about that now. And I do love my music, and I think it's an aspect of my soul and part of my soul's voice that you can feel. And I like using analog and digital equipment like my Roland MC909 and my Machine Studio. Um, but I don't know. It's kind of tough. I've DJ'd almost all of the Imagine festivals because Darren's a good friend of mine, and he knew I could DJ really well, and so he had faith in me. So I've done a lot of the openings. I've done silent discos. I did the yoga studio, and one of the DJ sets I did. It wasn't the last time that you and I were there, Jim, but it might have been. I played 3 or 4 original tracks, and a lot of my music is different. It's not formulaic, and I've purposely tried to stay away from formulaic stuff. I mean, maybe that boom boom snap, boom boom clap, maybe a little tiny bit formulaic, but that's just to get the bass line going.
You have to have
and
parameters.
the
I mean,
rhythm.
there's rules.
You have to
I
do
get
the
you.
rhythm, yeah. And so my music's weird, and a lot of it's anticlimactic, and I very much am imagining myself in an ambient, energetic environment when I'm producing. So, but my production is different than my DJing. My DJing, I'll go from house music to disco to rap to everything. I love all the music, and my production stuff is more akin to world ethnic, down tempo, crazy stuff. And I
Right.
don't have
I'm a Philip Glass
anybody I
fan.
can compare it.
I appreciate it's minimalistic. I mean, it was very much like Henry Sayes, but like a little more kind of explorative texturally. It was developmental, and like you're saying, it wasn't climactic like these huge swells and drops and all this crazy shit. It didn't feel like that. It was more just like felt like an acid trip, where it was just kind of like flowing forward infinitely at a calm pace, like good clean acid or whatever. It felt like that, where it's just like, oh, here we go, here we go, here we go.
For sure. I love that. I love that you say that about it because anybody's interpretation of my music, I love to hear.
Oh, we'll talk about it more. I know your phone's dying. I don't know. We'll have to keep in communication. I definitely would love to help again with the Imagine stuff. I don't know how that'll work. But with
Well,
COVID
who
and
knows
everything.
now with COVID and everything? It's such a strange reality we live in, and I hope there's some semblance of normality that comes back. But the reality is if you think and look back on history, every 100 years or so, there's a bad virus like this, and it's almost like it's the cyclical nature of the virus itself to overcome our immunities. And who knows? Or it could be part of the whole Georgia Guidestones and 444 and or 40,000 people left, and that's easier to control. Who knows, man? The reality is I think people need to be careful how many eggs they put in their proverbial manifestation basket right now.
Hold
Where
on loosely. Yeah.
they need to be careful of where you're putting your energy to, because that will dictate your karma and what you have in this life. And everybody's got it right and everybody's got it wrong. And once again, human beings trying to humanize and put a language to something that has no language. It's so incomprehensible. It's ineffable. It's unpronounceable. And I think we can feel it better than we can describe it. And I've been,
1,000%.
yeah, I can feel you, man. I feel your energy, your vibes, and you're in Colorado. And Raphael, I'm pretty sure, aren't you in Austria or Germany or something?
Vienna.
Austria,
Vienna, yeah. So there you go. I can feel your vibes, guys. You got good vibes, and I hope to be part of that and unfolding. And I think that there's more community in this world than we realize, and that the powers that be want us to feel alone, because there are powers that be that do want to see the destruction as long as it benefits their coffers and their profits.
That's what the last Star Wars movie is all about. I mean, I don't know if you're into Star Wars, but basically, long story short.
Oh,
no
dude, I'm a
spoilers.
great Jedi all the way, man.
There you go. I mean, it's like the whole point with like, Poe being like, yo, Lando, how did you figure this out in the fucking first iteration against that Emperor, the Emperor then? And he's like, you got to find the others, McKenna Leary style. Find the others. Send out your vibes. So yeah, and kind of closing. I mean, as far as the, who knows what will happen. We'll keep in touch because I think music will always be a thing. It's just shifting. So maybe this will be virtual kind of setups and silent discos at home or whatever, but you're dope as fuck. Your music's tits. I love it. You're a cool dude. I hope to hang out at some point. Definitely, dude. I'm not just saying it. Like I meant it. Like I as soon as I met you and hung out with some of y'all at that thing, I was like, oh, this is tribe. This is just how it is.
Yeah,
Beautiful
I feel the same
location.
way. I feel it.
So I guess in closing,
Yeah,
I mean,
Orcas Island, man. This is a
Oh,
beautiful
dude.
place, and
Yeah, if nobody knows, Google that. It's in the San Juan Islands. Like took a ferry boat to get there. It's kind of a ratchet situation. Very beautiful. Like it's different than anything I'd ever experienced. I guess in closing, I'll kind of just say it's very much like the Bill Hicks situation when he talks about like enjoy the ride, like it's just a ride. Don't take it too seriously. And what we do need to do right now is kind of vibe where we want. Like which timeline do we prefer? Because fear or love, that's the whole point of the Bill Hicks thing. It's like, are you going towards more locks in your doors, more
yeah.
fucking flu shots, more freaking out, like more disempowerment, or are you going towards authenticity and integrity and love and compassion and further up and further in? That further up and further in comes from C.S. Lewis's The Last Battle in Narnia, as basically. And this is where I'm going to kind of leave it because, yes, there's all this metaphysical speculation and let's go to the other side and all this stuff, but it's like, I think this is a kind of Christian type. I think that all the Bodhicypha energy is coming this way. I think it's starting to crash into here, hopefully, and it imbues this reality in such a way that it kind of gets into a golden age. Long
It
story
always
short,
has
the last
been,
battle.
man.
Exactly. It's a matter of perspective. We're there.
This life is the proving ground. This earth is literally the testament. Like our lines in the sand is drawn naturally and supernaturally here on this earth, and you can build your temple or just let it get dirty.
Amen. I'll say this and then I'll let you say a final word and Raphael can close it out. The track I actually picked to close this out, you probably won't hear it right now, but maybe if you hear this interview later, 17-minute track by Justice called Planosphere, which I think is just this like kind of architectural thing that I think you'll appreciate if you haven't heard it. If you have, you'll get it. But C.S. Lewis from The Last Battle says, long story short, it's this apocalyptic situation. All this shit's going to shit, and it's an apocalypse in their world at Last Battle. And basically, this one character says, "I've come home at last. This is my real country. I belong here. This is the land I've been looking for all my life, though I never knew it till now. come further up and come further in. Guys, heaven is a place on earth if you so choose. You got to just vibrate in that space, and we can do that. It's a choice, love or fear. So I hope everybody chooses love, and I hope to see you guys in the real life.
Yeah, man, let's vibrate like the Mayans to that higher sphere, if you want to get all Quetzalcoatl about it. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the honor.
Thank you both. This is Team Rabbit Hole Edition 93 live in action. And to close off, kindly mute yourself. Thank you. Rather than coming up with something super smart to say, I will just read one paragraph from the Secret Teachings of All Ages, since we all agree on the great contribution that Manly P. Hall has given us. As it is the 93rd episode refers to the Hanged Man, therefore, quote, esoterically, the Hanged Man is the human spirit which is suspended from heaven by a single thread. Wisdom, not death, is the reward for this voluntary sacrifice, during which the human soul, suspended above the world of illusion and meditating upon its unreality, is rewarded by the achievement of self-realization. Thank you both once again, and thank you all for listening. Enjoy yourselves.
Thanks, Raphael.
Radio Okitalk, Radio Okitalk, von Mensch zu Mensch.